y'all, welcome back to Only Hope Podcast. I'm your host, Caroline Thornton. I'm just so excited to be recording another episode with you guys, and I just appreciate every single person that's been listening. I appreciate all feedback. I appreciate every like, follow, comment, subscription, like whoever subscribes, every like and comment on TikTok and Instagram and YouTube, and every follow on Spotify, every listen on Apple Podcasts, whatever it is. Like, I just appreciate it so much. You guys have no idea how much that means to me and how it just pushes me and encourages me to continue this. This has definitely been something that's not like just easy for me, but I'm just trusting in the Lord, and I just appreciate every single person that listens. I pray for every single person that listens to this podcast. I pray for every single person that listens to like a reel or a TikTok or a short on YouTube, any of those things. I just pray that the Lord blesses you guys, and this podcast just glorifies the Lord. It grows his kingdom, and I see him doing that every day, and it's so amazing to watch. And I just wanted to say I appreciate everyone for tuning in every single week. It is so meaningful and so impactful to me and my life and my family and all of those things. So today I'm going to be talking about grief, and grief particularly in obedience to the Lord. This is going to be a little different than my episode about suffering well, where if you haven't listened to that, go back and watch it. I have 2 episodes on that actually. I pray over every episode, every topic that I discuss, and I pray that the Lord blesses people with whatever his agenda is. But I will say the Suffering Well episodes are, I don't want to say like some of my best episodes, because, I think depending on what you're going through, any of them can touch you and all of those things. However, those 2 episodes were really things that I have learned in the past few years, and I really feel like the Lord has taught me so much with Suffering Well. Like, that has been such a huge thing that he has taught me. And so I kind of feel like I've not mastered, because like I haven't. I'm never going to master suffering well. I still like suffer every day on certain things, and I don't always handle it well. But I do think the Lord just like has taught me so much about that, and I think that's just a topic that I'm more knowledgeable in, and the Lord has provided me more wisdom in. So if you haven't gone and watched those or listened, go back and listen to those after you listen to this episode, because they're definitely different, but they can go a little hand in hand in what I'm about to talk about. So I'm going to talk about, like I said, grief in obedience to the Lord. And I think sometimes people can say, well, like, if it brings you peace, it's from the Lord. I just want to kind of like debunk that a little, like, not saying that like things from the Lord don't make you feel good, don't bring peace and all those things. But not everything from the Lord feels good, and not everything that feels good is from the Lord. I think we just need to make that very clear. And I think like a lot of people just talk about, oh, well, just trust God. And that can seem like very easy, but it's not as easy as it sounds. And I don't think enough people talk about the grief in the obedience, in trusting God. And a lot of times, in my experience, and I feel like with a lot of people I know, there can be a sense of a feeling of loss in your obedience. And that loss can mean like multiple different things. It can be loss in the plans that you had in mind for your life, loss of some relationships that you were praying that the Lord would restore, loss of control that you've once like fought just so hard to keep. And I think that is something like I've really struggled with for a while. One, and just, I think everyone has plans for their own life, and when it doesn't line up with God's plans, it can be so difficult and like a very hard pill to swallow. I will say, like, I felt very blessed, and like I met my husband, and we met in high school. We went to college together. We graduated college. We kind of like got into our careers, we got engaged, and then we got married. So we didn't get married right out of college. We took like a few years to kind of get established with our careers. But I feel like I got engaged and I got married in like really the time frame that I imagined I would in my head. And so those are kind of like boom, boom, boom. And I think like because that was kind of in line with what I always thought in my head, like from probably since I was like a little girl, I kind of just like always imagined that. So when I got married, it was like a huge kind of like not, I don't know if I want to say slap in the face. I don't know if that seems too dramatic or like too harsh, but sort of like that where I expected marriage to be different than it was because my other like expectations about like getting married and things like that were all aligning. So I was just like, okay, well, marriage is going to be like this and it's going to be so amazing. There's going to be no struggles. Like I've met my husband when I was 16, he was 17, and we had gone through a lot. Like we had gone through like multiple breakups throughout like college and stuff, and we gone through all these things and we really like grew up together. Like I said, I was 16. We then transitioned of like we went through a lot of transitions of like what it's like now in college, what it's like after college and getting into the adult world and careers and transitioning all these things. And we moved across the country. And so like I felt like we'd been through a lot, but so I was dumb and naive. So I was like, oh, we went through all the hard stuff before we got married. And it's just like, no, not anywhere close. You don't go through the hardest stuff in your life and like by the time you're 25 and then you have no hard things after that. Like how naive is that? Like we were just at the beginning of our careers. We were babies. We didn't understand anything. And literally, I thought I knew everything. I just thought I could control things to go my way. And not in a sense of like, oh, like I want things to go this way, this way, this way. And like in a bad way. Like it still was like aligned with, the biblical sense of like me wanting to obey the Lord and obey like his structures that he has planned for your life and your family and all of that. So I thought because like I was in obedience to those things that marriage was going to come easy, the rest of life would come easy. Then you just get married, works great, and you make good money, you have kids, that's just easy. You like have an easy birth, then an easy postpartum, an easy child, then you just are like, okay, I'm ready for another one, and financially we can do that, and your body's ready, like all these things you just don't know until you know. And so I think I struggled with just for a while, and I think me and my husband both struggled with just like grieving what we thought our marriage was going to be like, because I think everyone gets married and they just have an idea of what they think it's going to be, and 99% of the time it doesn't turn out the way you expect it to, and that's fine. Marriage is beautiful, but it's not just like what you see on TV and in movies. Like there's just so much more nuances, so much more complexity to it. And the older you get, things from your childhood pop up, and especially like when you start having kids and like, you think you've healed from certain things and you haven't, you get more responsibilities and work, and that becomes more stress added on to those responsibilities. Like there's just so much that changes. And you don't see that when you're young and just naive and lacking like wisdom and experience in life. So I definitely like for sure have just struggled with like the grief of my life not going exactly the way I wanted it to. Yeah. Also just like the grief of losing relationships that I thought were going to be different, whether it's like friendships or even family members where you think those relationships are going to be one way and they're not always. And sometimes you think friendships are going to like, this person's always going to be your best friend, and then things change, and so many situations of that. And just like also just grief of thinking, at least for me, like that I did have control over my life in a sense. And that I thought if I just did this, if I just worked this hard, if I just said all the right things and prayed and did my quiet time and seek the Lord and all these things, that would mean that all these prayers would get answered and all these opportunities would happen and life would just be easy and everyone would be healed. And like, that's just so naive, and that's just not the way life works. The Lord, he answers prayers on his time, not ours. And he has his own agenda and his own will and his own plan for our lives. And there's nothing you can really do to change that. I've realized like God is not a God of works. We can't work our way into things or out of things. It's definitely a blessing in the sense of, like when you do mess up, you don't want like God to be a God of works and like you feel you're always having to strive and achieve. And we never could work our way to that. But so it's definitely a blessing, like that God gives us our salvation for free, that we don't have to work our way to that. But yeah, there is a sense of loss and a grief that you feel when things don't go the way you were thinking they would, and the way your life was going to go, and the way situations and relationships and all that go. And I just think this is a topic that not enough people talk about. I don't think the church really talks that much about grief in this sense. I have experienced feeling grief in my obedience to the Lord, and I just definitely don't feel like I hear hardly anyone talk about this. And sometimes I used to think like I was doing things wrong, and it made me question myself and the Lord and be like, did I hear him right? Did I not do things right? Because I thought, okay, if I just obey the Lord, then everything good is going to happen. And that's just not always the case. Sometimes obedience can look like walking away even though you really wanted to stay and you would rather stay, but the Lord is telling you to walk away and you don't know what's going to be on the other side of that. And that's why you have to have faith and trust in the Lord. And I believe like in situations like that, goodness will come out of that, but it may take time. And you don't know that when you're walking away from certain situations or certain people, and all you can see is what's in front of you. And you're like, I'd rather just stay here. I don't want to leave. But the Lord is asking you to leave. There's grief in that. Sometimes the obedience is the Lord asking you to stay quiet and not speak on a situation or not say anything when someone's talking to you. And like every part of you is just wanting to speak up and say what's on your mind, and you're like literally biting your tongue. Like, I can't tell you how many times the Holy Spirit has convicted me to just be like, nope, don't say it, don't say it, don't say it. And I'm like, oh. Hey, like you literally are using all of the self-control that you have to not say anything. And there can be grief in that of just being like, and like I have struggled with that for sure, of just being like, I think like since I have been like so devoted to the Lord the past few years, and when I finally surrendered my life to him, then I want like everyone to feel what I'm feeling, and I want everyone to experience what I'm experiencing. So because I feel that way, then when people are talking about what they're going through and their experiences and stuff, I'm like, I just want to be like, just do this, just say this, pray this, seek the Lord on this, read this, like whatever it is. And sometimes they may not be ready to hear that. Like, timing is important. Your attitude about the person that you're sharing some of the wisdom you've learned is important. And it's timing on your part and on their part. And like, they have to be open to hearing it. And there's so many things that can go into that. And that's why like seeking the Lord before you even speak is important, because like he knows, oh, their heart is not ready to hear this right now, or this is exactly what they've been praying that they would hear from me about. Like, there's so many things where it can be like, it could be a good thing where like you pray before you speak, and the Lord tells you to say something specific, and then they're like, oh my goodness, I've been praying to God that he would reveal this and say this to me in a certain way or whatever, and you did that. So there's both sides of that where that's important, but there could be so much grief in just being like, I can't say anything, don't say anything. And biting my tongue is a new thing I've been learning, and it's not easy. It really isn't. There's also just letting go of when you don't want to, not because you don't care or Not because like you stopped caring about a situation or a person, but because God is asking you to trust him because he has something new in store for you, whether that's like a relationship or a job opportunity or a ministry you're in. Like there's so many situations where that can happen and it can feel so hard and there can be a lot of grief in that. And sometimes it can just be really hard to even like describe what it feels like when God is asking you to obey him when you don't even understand why you're doing this. But you know for sure, you know him and you know in your know that his way is better. And sometimes like you can feel like the weight of what God is asking you to do. And sometimes you can feel like the weight of what he's asking you to do, or what to let go of, or what to believe in, or what to believe for, all these things. And you just feel like that weight on you. But you also know you've been in this thing with God for too long that you can't not obey him. And sometimes it feels like the obedience he's asking from us feels like it's going to cost us too much. It's going to cost us so much to obey him and do what he's asking for us to do. And that's when we can be disobedient. That's when we can be fearful and have anxiety and things like that. But even if we don't understand, even if it feels like it's going to cost us too much, we have to still do it anyways, because there is going to be goodness on the other end of that you just don't see. And even if it takes time, let's just say he's saying your boyfriend that you have been dating for 5 years, this is not a godly man. He's not going to be a godly husband. And I want you to have a godly husband that is going to lead you well. And this man's just not it. But there's so much codependency there. And it feels like you leaving him will cost you so much. But you know he's not, for instance, a Christian. He's not a believer, but he's still a good person. And you are just like, I can't do it. I can't do it because it just feels like it's going to cost you so much. You don't know the future. You feel like, how am I going to start over? All these questions race through your mind, but you don't know on the other end of all of that and on the other end of the grief and the suffering that you go through in those difficult moments, there is going to be a godly man that leads your household and your children so well. And he's going to be what you've been praying for. And that's just an example of a situation where like it feels like that obedience is just going to cost us so much, but there is a better plan that God has for you on the other end of that. And I will say, like, going back to what I was saying about like the feeling of peace, where like people talk about, oh, like if it's from God, it'll make you feel peace. Now, for instance, like before I got married, my wedding day, like I felt so much peace, like I felt so much comfort, and like I'm making the right decision. Like I had no question about that. So I do believe like in a situation like that, God gives you peace when it's like the right situation or the right choice that you're making. But some other times you can feel like really anxious if God's telling you to do something and you feel like, I don't know, that feels really scary, that feels difficult, it feels like it's going to cost me so much to give this up. Situations like that where you can feel like anxious about what he's telling you to do. And it's not that he's making you feel anxious, it's that you have fear behind the unknown and you're scared to move forward and to push and to trust him and to obey. And sometimes we still just have to push through that anxiety and do it. And especially like it can make us feel anxious if he keeps telling us. And you feel it, like if he says, say this to this person, and you just feel all day, you're kind of fighting it, and you can feel really anxious about that, and you're fighting it all day long, and then you finally just say it. And then you can feel, then sometimes you just feel like this peace or this like release of like a weight lifted off of you when you did obey, because he has been pushing you to do it and you were fighting it off the whole time. And honestly, like in obedience, just it doesn't always feel like rainbows and sunshine all the time, you know? Like, just an example, I felt the other day the Lord pushing me to tell my husband something that I was just like, I don't really want to say that. Like, I don't really want to do that. He's not going to respond that great. He's going to be like, why would you say that? that's weird. I just didn't feel like he was going to respond well to it. It's like, I'm like, I know him and I know how he's going to respond to this before I even say it. So why do I need to say this? And God's just like, no, you need to do it. I'm just like, and I was fighting it all day. And then like, finally I just say it. He had the response that I thought he was going to have, which is fine. But I just felt like the Lord is just like, it's not on you for the way he responded. You still obeyed me and you did the right thing. And you can't not obey me because you're worried about how someone else is going to respond. Like, leave that to me. It's your job to just obey me. That's my role, is I have to obey the Lord and what he tells me to do or what he tells me to say. My job is not to try to figure out or control or be led even by the way someone responds, even my husband. And honestly, I don't know. There's so many things could actually be like the variable behind that, of like, maybe whatever I said, my husband responded just is a normal reaction of how he would respond. And it wasn't like a bad reaction. I'm not trying to talk bad about him, but like maybe that was just his normal tendency. And then later he thought more into it and maybe it did, like, that seed kind of got planted or something like that. Or maybe it was also just a way that the Lord was trying to produce more obedience out of me and to test me and to prove to me that, like, okay, I need to be obeying you regardless of what other people are going to think, how they're going to react, what they're going to say, what they're going to do, whatever it is. God's going to take care of the rest and I just have to obey. If like that can come down to something as simple as like your husband just is like, okay, that was weird. Why'd you say that? And kind of reacts weird, all the way to you standing up for what's right at work and losing your job from it, because that can happen too. And you are obedient to the Lord if he told you to do something and it costs you your job, but maybe he has a better job out there for you. So it can be like on a small scale and a large scale even. And sometimes the grief of obedience can be the Lord really pruning you. And other times the grief of obedience can be God asking you to surrender the very thing he promised you, just like it happened and Abraham had to do and had to give up, had to surrender his son Isaac after God had promised him Isaac. And other times the grief of obedience is being willing to endure certain situations, like being misunderstood or people starting rumors about you or people just humiliating you. And when you're doing exactly what God is asking you to do. And we have to stop like assuming that when we obey God, we will be met with like this amazing peace and all these miracles will happen. But more often than not, we are being wrestled with disappointments and having to move forward in faith anyways. And I just want to make this clear. God does not want you to suffer, but he does allow it in doses to increase our trust. And our pain and our suffering isn't to hurt us. It is to save us from a life where we are like self-reliant or self-satisfying, self-absorbed, because we can be all of those things when things are just going our way. And like how I was talking about earlier, how when we think we can control the outcomes of things and when things go the way we wanted it to go and are aligned with our plan in our life, we're just all self-seeking then and self-centered people. And honestly, that sets us up for the worst pain and suffering that we could ever experience, because that is the separation of God. And that's the worst pain we could ever experience. So just want to reestablish, it's okay to say how hard and how confusing it is to be obedient. I think we need to talk about this a lot more as believers. This needs to be discussed more, like in church and in small groups and all of that. But we don't want to let that determine our faith. We need to get up and we need to see what God has on the other side of our obedience. Like I was saying earlier, like you just don't know what the Lord has on the other side of that obedience. He is working things out that you can't even see and you don't even realize. But if you just stay faithful, if you just stay obedient, the amount of abundant things that can happen on the other side of that obedience. So trust God. Trust his timing, trust his ways, and just trust that if you are obeying him, you are going to be in line with his plan. And if you're aligned with his plan and you're obeying him, he is not going to leave you. He is not going to forsake you. Well, that's all I have for today. I know this was a little shorter than my other ones, but I really hope that this can just be comforting. Like, let's talk about this more, about the grief of obedience, the grief of things not always going the way we thought it was going to go, or the loss we have felt from obeying God. I want to recommend you guys to sit this week, and during your quiet time this week, sit and think about what is something I've been grieving about that I haven't even been fully aware of, that I've been grieving about. And then I want you guys to then pray and ask the Lord to reveal more opportunities for you to obey him, and that you will say, even if there's grief that comes from this obedience, I am choosing to trust you and follow you regardless of if there's grief there. So these are the 2 things I want to encourage you to do this week. But thank you again for watching, and I will see you guys next week. Thanks. Bye.